2 statement wins. How the Ravens did the near impossible. How Kyler Murray is doing the shouldn't be possible. And how Zach Wilson did the absolutely impossible. Worst start for a Jets quarterback ever. Also, the curious decision the NFL made to have taunting penalties ruined the game. Let's go.
Lose, you get drafted.
Nice shirt. Nice shirt by Pablo and Izzy today, by the way. Thanks, George. Appreciate that.
Monday after week 1 is for the overreactors. Monday after week 2 is for the statement game hunters. Raiders, Panthers, Broncos, Cowboys, all with big wins. But we start with the Baltimore Ravens to win a game after being decimated like no team has by injuries. And then after losing week 1, and after being on a short week, and after going up against Mahomes, and after starting with a pick 6, it just doesn't compute how Lamar Jackson settled down, how the Ravens defense came away with the huge takeaway late, and how John Harbaugh asked Lamar Jackson, you want to go for it? And they made the analytics call of the moment to go for it on 4th down and take the game. George Sedano, around the horn to you. What statement did the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson just make?
That they are as resilient a bunch as we have through 2 weeks, right? All the reasons you outlined just a moment ago. Now, here's the thing. When you look at them, they played to their identity, Tony. This is a team that the last several times they've played the Chiefs, it feels like they're trying to outduel the Chiefs and play their game. They should be running the football, whether that's with Lamar Jackson or their stable of running backs, because that offensive line is awesome, regardless of who's running back there at running back. And obviously Lamar. Lamar is the cheat code. When he runs the way he's capable of running, then they're virtually impossible to stop at times offensively. So we saw that. And for Lamar Jackson individually, Tony, we saw Sammy Watkins talk about it earlier in the week, how he needed to get that win. He talked about it after the fact, saying that he got a quote-unquote monkey off his back, getting that victory against the Chiefs. So resiliency across the board.
Israel Gutierrez, what did you learn from last night?
Yeah, it wasn't a must-win game going in because obviously it's the Chiefs. And if you look at their next 3 games, the Ravens didn't look that difficult. But in terms of the way they won this is kind of a game changer for them. And I feel like for Lamar Jackson as well, we all know sort of the kryptonite thing with the Chiefs, but just being able to not only come back from everything you mentioned there, Tony, but within the game to come back from down 11 points in the 4th quarter, something he's never done. The previous largest comeback was 3 points by him, which is, obviously not that big a number. All of those reasons sort of make you reinforce that, hey, this is a great team because of Lamar Jackson. And like George mentioned, because of the running game, which Lamar Jackson obviously contributes to a ton. And so if they can do that, and if he plays the way he knows he can play against, regardless of what team it is, because the Chiefs obviously a daunting team, then they can beat anybody. And I think that's something that they've always thought and they always believed because of Lamar Jackson, but maybe because of these other injuries, maybe because of the way their playoffs games have ended, maybe they question it a little bit. I think this game sort of reinforces that, and sky's the limit, essentially, regardless of how many injuries they have.
Evan, you willing to go there? Sky's the limit, a game-changing win for Lamar and the Ravens?
I don't know if the sky's the limit, but I do know this. Lamar Jackson is not just a great player, but he also revealed himself as a great leader, a leader that a team can get behind. When the coach asks you at the most critical point in the game whether or not you should go for it on 4th down, and he screams back, hell yeah. Not only
but who says no in that situation, Kevin, honestly?
Well, I'm just saying the coach is entrusting his leadership in his quarterback. And remember, this is a quarterback who has been questioned. And this is a quarterback who we said going into this game that it was him versus Mahomes. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, he was the better quarterback for his team late in that game because he didn't throw a late pick. Mahomes tried to force one in there when he was going down, probably just should have eaten the ball and gave up that pick. I love the leadership that Lamar Jackson has given to his team.
Pablo Torre.
Look, the statement to me, the biggest statement, was not the actual statement he gave to Harbaugh. It's the fact that he somersaulted into the end zone. That told you everything with 3 minutes plus left.
No
that Lamar Jackson wanted to tell everybody. No, well, listen. The reason, though, I'm going to throw some cold water on all of this, Tony, is because the Chiefs' defense is abysmal. Can we say that just very bluntly now? The Chiefs' defense is allowing more yards per attempt than anybody else in the NFL this season. And yes, you'll say, okay, that's only 2 games. They played the Browns and the Ravens, both AFC contenders. Well, I think that's kind of the point, that they need to be better than the AFC contenders, and they're definitively not. And in fact, if you go back and look, go back all the way to November 1st. They have played 13 games since November 1st, including the postseason. They have one win by more than 6 points. One! Patrick Mahomes is so good that we have amnesia, right? But the defense has been struggling for a very long time.
Sounds like somebody's hitting a panic button here, defensively at least for Kansas City. How they lost that game, being up 11, George, concerning?
Tony, it's not like anyone is confusing the Kansas City Chiefs with the 2000s Ravens defense. Like, what are we talking about here? They're a video game. That's how they win games. They put up points. So to douse the Baltimore win with some cold water like Pablo tried to do because of the Chiefs defense makes no sense. They've never had this great defense that he speaks of.
Israel?
10 minutes, Tony. The Ravens had the ball for 10 more minutes than the Chiefs. Just pointing that out there as, again,
when the Ravens are doing well, that's what they do. They run the ball, they control the clock. And for it to start the way it did with a pick six, you're already giving Mahomes a 7-point lead before he's on the field.
What?
I mean, yeah, incredible. We'll move on. Speaking of statements, here's a statement. The Arizona Cardinals play just about the most exciting games you could have. This one with the Vikings, 34-33, off the rails. Another bonkers game for Kyler Murray, who's making his case for, with the guys we just talked about, most exciting player in the game. But Minnesota had this 37-yarder on the foot of Greg Joseph before it leaks wide. Israel, what's the statement from this one?
Very similar to what the Ravens statement is we've got a quarterback that's going to keep us in or let us win every single game. Because everything else is pretty confusing. Last week against Travis Henry, basically didn't let him do anything on the ground. This week against Dalvin Cook, let him run all over the place. Derrick Henry, excuse me. And obviously with the late field goal that the Minnesota Vikings should have gotten there, you're looking at this entirely differently. If they make that, and just a little note here, Kirk Cousins technically outplayed Kyler Murray here if you look at QBR and rating, but obviously Kyler Murray is going to keep you in any game. It just makes me wonder, just like that Chiefs defense, is this Cardinals defense good, or is Kyler Murray going to have to do this all the time on his way to winning MVP?
Kevin Blackstone, statement from yesterday afternoon.
Well, you know, last season the Cardinals came up a little bit short, right? And now they've won a game that they shouldn't have won. That was a 37-yard field goal. You consider that a chip shot in the NFL, but now they've gone to 2-0. So you look around the league at teams at 2-0, and you look at the percentages that teams who are 2-0 since 2000 get to the playoffs, extremely high. So that's the way they've got to be thinking about themselves right now. And Izzy's absolutely right. I mean, you look at Kyler Murray. We saw what he could do last year. Now you're seeing even more. 3 times, right, outside of the pocket, hitting for scores. Did that 5 times all of a year ago. The guy is getting better, and that's got to be scary.
Repeat that stat. So in 2 games, he has 3 touchdowns hitting guys when he's outside of the pocket. And how many did he have last year?
5. That's what the stat said.
Wow. That doesn't really compute to me. They did start 2-0 last year, Kevin Blackstone, and missed the playoffs. We'll go to Pablo Torre now.
Hold on. Israel said that Kirk Cousins technically played better than Kyler Murray. I'm going to have to do my own research on that, Tony. I'm going to go find the fact independently, I think, on that subject. But beyond that, the fact is Kyler Murray is doing stuff, right, that looks chaotic. He is scrambling around. He's running backwards on a 4th down, and he heaves it up there. But the reality is, this is planned, and it's not as improvised as it looks. They know what they're doing. Him and Christian Kirk have this bond through 2 weeks very clearly, where they know exactly where they need to be. That was a cover 0 blitz. They read perfectly. So as much as Kyler Murray feels like the human joystick, and I totally get it, he's so fun to watch, he's under far more control, I think, than we may realize.
George Dano.
Tony, that play that Pablo was alluding to that we saw the video of to Kirk, I mean, when you think about the skill that it takes to get that pass off his back leg, right? Throwing it basically across his body practically as he's lobbing it up and getting it on the money. Like, I know Kirk had to stop for a second to try to get that thing, but considering the pass rush he was facing, that just goes to show you the growth that Kyler Murray has had from one year to the next, because he was fantastic last year. He's even better now, and I think because of his growth, this Arizona Cardinals team may be a team that could get into the playoffs despite KB's flawed 2-0 stat earlier.
George, before we sit down, you had a real problem with Mike Zimmer and the way they approached that field goal from 37 yards.
I mean, dude, you had 35 seconds left. You could have ran a couple more plays to get your kicker closer. We've seen kickers miss extra points, including one in Tennessee and Seattle in the Tennessee-Seattle game. So that's not a gimme 30
Well, I bring that up because then you must have loved what the Dallas Cowboys did at the end of their game. I mean, Mike McCarthy's saying, roll tape here, Mike McCarthy's saying that he couldn't find the scoreboard and the scoreboard went out, and then that Kellen Moore had a very large camera person in front of him to block his view, and he didn't know how much time was left. So that, I mean, Greg Zerlin is a big kicker, right? I mean, he sent the Rams to the playoffs on a bomb once. So you know he can hit it, but that's how that game ended. Dallas gets a much-needed win. Pablo, Dallas' statement here?
I mean, apparently that they're too broke to afford a watch. Like, how is that a plausible excuse? But the second statement is simply this: trust the result, not the process. Playing for a 56-yard field goal is obviously coaching malpractice. But because Greg the Leg, great nickname, hit it, yes, trust the result, all is good, not the way we got there, which was totally fumbling and bumbling.
Kevin Blackstone?
Well, look, the other week they lost late on a field goal. This time they win it on a field goal. So you're right. You trust the outcome, not the process. I will say this about the Cowboys. They ran the ball, and that put them in a position at the end to win this game. The emergence of Tony Pollard, 109 yards on the ground to go with Ezekiel Elliott and the different style that he has, that's got to bring some comfort to that.
Are you willing to go where some have gone that Tony Pollard should be the, as they say, bell cow? I don't even know what animal that is, but the bell cow for this backfield? No, okay.
No, absolutely not. No, it's still
Gutierrez, how about you?
If Legatron, also his nickname, if he misses that kick, none of those excuses are ever told, right? They're just going to come up with some other reasons as to why they bungled that. Look, the other thing about playing the Chargers, though, you know you're going to find yourself in that scenario there. So basically, you just got to do one game-winning drive, right? And they did bare minimum. They got themselves a 57-yard field goal in that situation. So it's really hard to say much about the Cowboys here other than, they avoided a disaster.
56. George, how about you?
I mean, who knew Andre the Giant reincarnated as a cameraman that didn't allow the offensive coordinator to see the scoreboard? But here's what it is. Better to be lucky than good. That's the statement here, because the Chargers charged. They do this all the time. They had 6 plays, 6 first downs and 2 touchdowns called back by their own penalties over the last several years, regardless who the coach, who the quarterback, who the players
you're right
are.
about that.
This is what they do.
All right, Kevin Black, I'm going to ask you a question. It's 4th down here. You want to go for it, or do you want to just go to commercial and have PTI come back when we get back? Let's go for it.
Hell
yeah, that's what I want to hear. Buy or sell next on the other side.
Inspirational.
How do you do it?
Well, now the only one to win back-to-back Super Bowls were the 72 Dolphins, and historically for Brady, granted it's with the Pats, they've gotten better as the months progress in the football season. September usually his worst month.
Israel.
Well, of course, Tom Brady thinks he can do better against a Matt Ryan team. He feels like he can dominate them at any time. Look, I do think that next week, though, obviously, they definitely feel like they can get better. Next week, however, 2-0 Rams, 2-0 Bucks. Feels like you're going to get your answer there on the road as well. So it feels like the Bucks have to get better in order to continue this run.
Kevin Blackstone.
There will be no slander on my watch of Tom Brady predictions about getting better and what he can do in the future. We just saw it last season. You could make an argument that he's got the best receiving core he's ever had in those 3 guys right now. So with Antonio Brown as the 3rd option, that's crazy.
I don't think anyone's would argue the other side of it. There weren't any of those Patriot teams that had a better receiving core. Even the Moss here. Go ahead, Pablo.
Look, Tom Brady is better this season than he was last season. I think that is fact at this point. What I resent, though, is that Tom Brady is out here trying to be the son of immigrant parents that every immigrant parent wants. Like, yeah, you got a 99 on the test. You can do better, I guess, but why are you trying to make the rest of us look so bad?
Something you want to tell us, Pablo? Is something eating at you, Pablo?
An A- is still an A. Mom, is what I mean to say.
Yes, sir.
We move on. Zach Wilson to come out pick yesterday in his 2nd career game. It joins a dubious list of top 5 quarterbacks who had 4 interceptions and no touchdown passes in a game in the last 20 years. And to have your coach come out and say, it's okay to play a boring game of football. But just so it's not all bad, you remember people had mentioned Brett Favre when they were dreaming up a high end for Zach Wilson, Israel. So is this an allowable growing pain or a distressing sign in his 2nd career game?
It's also still a minus, Pablo. Look, I think it's a problematic sign a little bit when you look at, you're basically telling him, hey, don't make those throws, and he's making them anyway. So I understand all the physical gifts, but decision making is part of being a quarterback as well. And if you're continuously making excuses for your quarterback, eventually you're just going to be, okay, maybe he's not that good, maybe he's not that sound of a decision maker. So, even Patrick Mahomes needed a year behind another quarterback to come out. So
there he is. He's saying Zach Wilson's Patrick Mahomes. Kevin Blackistone, how about you?
Boy, talking about taking the air out of the balloon at the beginning of a season. Your quarterback, who's the future, plays horribly, and then you talk about there's nothing wrong with a boring game. What is going on with that franchise? Good grief, somebody talk to them. Play better at quarterback, play better at a team, and you don't say that as a coach.
Do you believe it's a distressing start, Kevin?
I believe it is highly unencouraging.
Pablo Torre, how about you?
Yeah, but it's also week 2, the second game of his NFL career, and on ESPN Daily today, we had our guest, Alex Smithman, on the show, Tony. We are now hanging out, talking football as the prophecy has been fulfilled. But the point is, Alex Smith himself, in his first game ever, #1 overall pick, let's recall, threw 4 interceptions. And I asked him, well, what was it like? How to get over that? And the whole thing is, look, Zach Wilson was doing too much. He's actually doing what his coach is saying to do the opposite of. Those were 10-3 scores, 13-3 scores, and he was trying to do too much. It is possible to manage a game. Just trust Alex Smith, man.
And George Sedano.
We can't just gloss over the fact that you mentioned it's the worst statistical start for any Jets quarterback in their rookie season. Somewhere Browning Nagel is looking around saying, hey, thank God it's not me anymore, or Ken O'Brien, or one of those guys, right? But here's the deal. Who thought the Jets were going to be good? Let's start with that.
Okay, this isn't, it's about, but this is about Zach Wilson going pick, another pick, and then 4 picks in his first 10 passes. It's not about whether the Jets
Joe Burrow did the same thing on 3 passes, and he's in his 2nd season. So what's to say a rookie shouldn't do that?
Okay. The record for
buy or sell 3. Tennessee Titans were minutes away from being 0-2. Well, Derrick Henry in this one, and that's how they fought back to beat Seattle in overtime. There was also a taunting penalty in this game for the Seahawks in mid-4th. They didn't end in points for Tennessee, but it seemed huge in the moment. There have been 8 taunting penalties in week 2 after 3 in week 1. The league allowing coordinated touchdown and turnover celebrations, but flags for what you're going to be seeing throughout the rest of this video here. Pablo, don't want to overreact in any way, but are taunting penalties ruining football?
Yes, because what I do is I go on the internet and all I find is people talking about taunting penalties. This is a giant rake that the NFL set up, laid on the ground, and then jumped on with both feet because nobody wants this. But now all we can talk about during games is this,
George?
Apparently.
Listen, it got Mina Kimes to curse on Twitter. Mama Kimes probably not happy about that. That's how you know this thing has gone too far.
Israel?
Do you know how hard it is to not flex after you've made a great play? It's kind of human nature. I don't think anybody
that Israel has problems.
Railroad tracks.
I mean, you flex all the time.
Kevin Blackistone.
Oh, this insatiable appetite of leagues, including the NBA and Major League Baseball, to try and acculturate people through threat of penalty has really gotten old, and they need to stop it.
The professor answers it like a professor.
Yeah.
George Sedano, Israel Gutierrez, thanks for being here today. Stone Torre. Showdown, 2 minutes.
Sounds like an MMA fight.